So I think the main threat that populism poses to democracy is that it is inherently suspicious of liberal democratic institutions. It views representative institutions of democracy, it views judicial institutions, courts, as obstacles to the expression of the will of the real people. Now, I think that, though of course there are imperfections in our democratic political system, there are imperfections in the judicial system, I think that they are still a condition for a pluralist democracy to thrive. So really the challenge that populism poses is that it really is a political movement that is aimed at the heart of the institutions that I think are central to an imperfect but still decent sort of way of life that liberal democracies have created. I'm worried, but not fatalistic. So I think that the challenge that people on the I think that there's been a marriage between populist forms and a content which I label, along with others, conservative nationalism. So the idea is that a lot of people today feel like there's a whole range of factors to do with globalization, to do with all sorts of things, the change in work, in labor, that have made their ways of life vulnerable. And I think that conservative nationalism and populism have given them a language to express a kind of an inchoate, unarticulated sense of vulnerability, of erosion. Now, the challenge for people who are not conservative nationalists, who are more sort of in a pluralistic conception, is to also find a language to address these often inchoate fears that members of historical majorities have felt. So far, I think we haven't been great at that. Liberal parties, not with a big L, but with a little l, tend to be quite technocratic, tend to be quite managerial. And I think that what our historical period needs is something more than just the promise that liberal parties have offered of being good managers, rule of law people. We need to present a vision of why these things matter to those very people who are feeling themselves attracted to a more dangerous populist message. I don't think we've done that yet, but I think that if you look at a country like Canada, certainly in my province, where the Liberal Party has more or less been, reduced to its lowest level ever, maybe even at the level of the federal government, where the Liberal Party has been, put in a vulnerable position, a minority, I think the challenge really has to be met. Liberal, small L parties that identify themselves with the liberal democratic dispensation have got to find a language that is more than managerial and technocratic. But I think their political survival depends on it, so at some point I'm confident that they will. We're living in a period of crisis of political parties. I think political parties, and here maybe my view is quite different from somebody like Pablo, who is much more sort of, places his confidence and his hope in more grassroots movements. I think that political parties are still a necessary evil in our democracy. And the period that we're living through is really a period of crisis for traditional political parties. You see it all over the world. Political parties are either being taken over by populist politicians like Donald Trump in the United States with the Republican Party. I would argue maybe even Bernie Sanders with the Democratic Party, or you have completely new political configurations that are built around one individual, like Macron's political party, that in one election has supplanted parties that have been around for decades in France. And I think you see this a little bit around the world. Now, I think political parties serve a very important function in democracies, which they themselves, traditional parties, are not perhaps sufficiently aware of. One of them, and I think this is absolutely central to the question that you posed, has to do with an epistemic function, a function in making the complicated world intelligible to people. Proposing a way, if you look at the traditional left, right, center parties, they all propose to people a way of reading reality that is a little bit simplified, but that's okay, because the world, if it's not a little bit simplified, it's just chaos, and it's beyond the ken of any individual person. and click on a website to vote for the party leader, we have, I think, to some degree eroded a kind of mediating function that parties are supposed to perform, and party elites are supposed to perform relative to the population. So I think that political parties, traditional political parties, have to take have to realize what's going on, and I think reconnect with their traditional role. Again, it's not a very fashionable thing to say. Political parties are not very popular these days, but in a mass society, right, which we don't have any choice but being. Canada's a country of close to 40 million people, and it's not even one of the biggest countries in the world. We have no choice but to sort of place our trust and invest our energies in these mediating institutions that political parties are.